Spring always seemed to sneak up on the little island village of Applemore. The sun rose over the distant pine-covered hills and stole through the windows of the cottages that looked over the bay, illuminating rooms which had lurked in gloom for the winter months, showing up long-hidden dust. You could mark the end of winter, Beth Fraser thought, by the sudden bustle of activity, as windows were washed clean and rugs hung out to air over washing lines. Even though it was only 9 a.m, the village was a hive of activity. For Beth, however, spring started with seed catalogues and bulb planting and plans. So many plans. Back in the early autumn of the year before. She glanced over her shoulder, looking at the back seat of her car. Between twin car seats lay the usual detritus of parenthood. Battered plastic beakers, tired picture books, discarded raisin boxes. But there was also a box of pale, unbleached tissue paper, and behind that the boot was stuffed with bunches of narcissi and hyacinths she'd grown in the greenhouse, which were headed for the Applemore farm shop. In an ideal world, she'd have delivered them in her little white van, which was kitted out with racks and shelving. In an ideal world, her ex-husband Simon wouldn't have come down with a stomach bug, meaning he couldn't do his share of the childcare at the beginning of a week which was shaping up to be the busiest she'd had in a while. It had been 18 months since they'd split up, and they'd reached a reasonably amicable sort of truce. He lived with Morag, his bank manager girlfriend, in a new-built house in a town 8 miles away. Beth pulled the car into a passing place to allow a tractor to come the opposite way, waving to Jimmy, the elderly farmer who she'd known since childhood. He touched his forehead with a finger in greeting, and the tractor rumbled past. She headed up the winding road that followed the line of the coast towards the grounds of Applemore House, the crumbling, stately home where she'd grown up. Ploughed fields were warming in the sunshine, hazed with green where the shoots of early barley were beginning to show through. It had been a particularly cold winter, and everything was taking longer to come to life as a result. The hedgerows, too, were showing the faintest hint of the pale acid green that would soon paint the whole landscape. But it was enough to fill her with hope, for days when she'd be working outside in a jumper and jeans, her fingers bending freely and not frozen solid, as she got everything organised on the acre of walled garden where she ran her flower farming business. Soon, Applemore would be full of tourists, making their way down the coast, stopping off to take photographs of the pretty little village and spend lots of money, she hoped, in her sister Polly's farm shop. She turned off the road at the newly painted sign. In neat lettering it announced, Applemore House Wild Camping and Farm Shop. In the 18 months that had passed since she and Simon had split, a lot had changed, not only becoming a single parent to toddler twins, but her family pulling together for the first time in what felt like forever.